Hey, what's up, everybody? Chad, THORChads, what's going on? FamiliarCow here. What's up, Chad? You there? Are we still getting settled? We could wait for a minute if we want to get people in. I can't hear you, Chad. I don't know if you're there or not. Yeah, what's up, Logan? You there? Can you hear me? Not sure if Chad's
Yeah, I can
mic is
hear you
working or
loud
not.
and
Maybe it's
clear.
my
Can you
end.
hear me?
Yep, I got you. Could you hear? Can anyone hear Chad, by the way?
Nah, can't hear him.
Okay. What's up, dude? How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm just watching my net worth dissolve right in front of my eyes. It's fucking exhilarating, boys.
Yeah, we're here for it.
I love it. I feel alive. Let's go.
Yeah,
You
man.
know what? Hey, pullbacks
It's
are
just
normal in a bull market,
volatility.
man. That's just what it is. You want volatility, up and down.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the way I think about this kind of stuff with THORChain, it just changes the incentives. Like before, there was over 75% of fees going towards LPs, and nodes were getting like 2 to 3% yields. Right now, node APRs are going up. So if you're bonding, it's definitely not a bad time to be doing that. Like it just changes the incentives, and it just aligns everything. Make sure that we have enough security for liquidity. So it's just the natural flow of things, the way I look at it.
I also look at it like a month ago, 2 months ago, with $10 or $7, I only would have got one rune. Now I'm almost getting two. So that's all that matters, boy. Just accumulate. That's it. Everything. I mean, we're looking at the charts of people using the tech. Volumes keep going up. I mean, I checked Twitter, the timeline, and saw people were kind of arguing back and forth with the direction of development and whatnot. And I think, I mean, it's valid points, and the community is voicing, which is great. I think it's awesome that the community is speaking their mind. It's just these are complex things to navigate. Like, what is the ultimate direction? And I'm sure you guys have some answers today, and that's why partly this spaces is happening. I'm very curious to hear the pros and cons of both directions, or if there's multiple directions, like what those pros and cons are.
Yeah, and yeah, so today, like, I think we could definitely talk about like what's going on in Q1 and what the short term priorities are. And yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about like what the long term is, just for THORFi and like new feature development in general. And obviously, there's been a ton of discussion on that, but all that is kind of like in the future because there's still a lot of priorities that need to be done over the next 3 to 5 months, which are going to take a lot of time to get shipped out. Like more pressing things than things like Rune Vault 2.0 and things like that, which are going to be obviously debated, and whether they even come to fruition one day. Like there's no even solid design or consensus around it yet. So it's like I personally think it's better to just focus on the things that are like for sure coming like around the corner, and like everyone agrees that there's some kind of consensus on like, hey, we're going to do these. We're gonna like focus on these things right now, and then we move forward and decide like where we go from there. And obviously, like safety, security, and like protecting LPs and things like that need to
Well, can you
come
explain
to
to
the
me real
forefront.
quick the two different main routes? So there's like one route or one vision where, from what I understand, it's purely cross chain liquidity and swapping, basically stream swaps. And then the other vision or route that you could take would be THORFi with lending and other kind of more like banking style products, if you will. So I'm very curious to know, like, what is your stance on things when it comes to those two routes? Is there is it kind of like, I haven't been a part of the THORChain community long enough to realize, was there an original ethos, if you will, and now we've migrated from that ethos, or was this kind of all part of it? And I don't know enough, right? And so that's why I'm tuning in here to learn. But that's just what I'm seeing. I'm almost seeing people torn on like these two paths, and it's causing a little bit of FUD. So I'm very curious to get your perspective.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me see if Chad is your mic working now. Let's
Yeah, I just got rid of the headphones.
There we go. Sweet. So, all right. I think let's dive in first and say like what the core of THORChain. There's obviously there's some debate around like where to go, but everyone knows that the core of THORChain is around around nodes bonding Rune, and then LPs that provide Rune and another asset for liquidity. And really, the debate is around how to scale liquidity in proportion to make sure that obviously we're not overscaling liquidity to be unsecured or anything, but there's just the difference in vision on like, do we get to Valhalla from just dual liquidity, which has been the core of THORChain from day one, or do we get there through this through a combination of dual liquidity, which is always the core of THORChain, but then building things on top of it like Savers, which is obviously a great product, but pushes risk around to the dual LPs where they're more highly Rune levered, and it changes their risk appetite. So, and then there's things like lending, which are built on top, which are completely separate. I think the kind of the debate right now is more around just where to go in the liquidity sphere, and mostly just making sure that things are safe. Because I think everyone can agree that like Savers is a really awesome product, but making sure that dual LPs, which is what the protocol is kind of built around, like whether that is the core product, or whether that can kind of be abstracted away and be in the background as part of this THORFi design, or I mean, it's just whether is that the core, and like, do we need to do everything we can to protect dual LPs, or is the future more like Savers plus protections to make sure that Savers is always solid?
Well, does that mean that, with people, it's like a lot of people fear change, right? So is this just the natural progression of things, and people who have been in the community a long time that were kind of sold on this original vision, they're just not capable of modifying their stance and realizing, hey, this is just a better vision overall? Or are they right in the sense of, hey, we should stick to that original ethos and not deal with DeFi because there's other risks with building out DeFi, like other risk vectors, if so that's kind of where I just don't know enough. And Chad, I'd be very curious to get your perspective on those risk factors, and like just overall what you think about that situation. Is this still maintaining kind of the original ethos, just enhanced, or is it like, yeah, we're kind of switching it up with these THORFi style features?
Well, originally, THORFi was not part of the original design, right? So if you go back to the original white paper, right, you could either look at the one that was from 2018, or you could look at the one from 2019, 2020. But like, the THORFi concepts weren't designed or considered at that time, because at that time we were just trying to like solve the problem of like cross-chain liquidity, which in itself is obviously a very complicated and difficult thing to solve, and required a lot of time and research and coding time and whatever else to get it to actually work, right? It didn't make sense at that time to start thinking about advanced features like Savers and lending and whatnot, because it just you got to walk before you can run. Do you know what I mean? So it's pure. It is totally respectable if people want to stay true to the original AMM perspective, right? I get it. They're not wrong, right? They're not. It's not a bad position. It makes complete sense in a lot of ways, right? At the same time, I can also think about the value of what Savers does. Just take Savers by itself, just for one moment. The value of what Savers does, right? Offering, especially like BDC yield on BDC. That is incredibly valuable for the industry as a whole. To do that in a decentralized way doesn't exist and has never existed until THORChain really did it. Do you know what I mean? And that in itself is um, how um, how Celsius and BlockFi and all those guys with tens of billions of dollars, had grown in part from that kind of earning or
Yeah, but they
interest
also
product.
exploded though, right? Or imploded.
Well, that's not a fair comparison, because the reason why they exploded is because they took people's Bitcoin and other assets, and they just started throwing it to other locations, making risky motions with those things. It's not fair to make
Yeah,
that
I get what you're
comparison.
saying. I'm
Right.
throwing it out there, right? That's what a lot of normies are going to think, though. Just like, hey, this is like that. Therefore, that might prevent me from investing in Room because the perceived risk is higher than the actual risk.
Yeah, to be fair, that's true, and that's also true with Terra, right? Terra created a lot of PTSD in a lot of people in the industry, and and rightfully so. They're more skeptical, right, of projects in general, which I think is actually generally a positive thing for the industry. But um, if you wanted to build something like a Savers, right, or lending for that matter, you have to do it with an AMM. You can't have Savers without the AMM. It doesn't make sense. It won't work, right? Same thing with lending. You can't do lending without the AMM as well. So, if you wanted to go that direction to provide these extra services that in their own right are just as important and as valuable as the AMM, if not more so, you have to do it with the AMM. Now you can make arguments, right? And we've had discussions in the past about the conceptual idea of forking THORChain and have one of the two chains be the static, AMM basic, base kind of model, if you want to call it that, and then another one that's kind of like the more advanced DeFi protocols that are breaking the mold in many respects, right? And by doing a fork, people who feel that one way can go on one side, and when people feel the other way, they can go on the other side, blah blah blah. And maybe that happens. I have no idea. I'm not a predictor of the future, but um, it is the value of these things. The value of THORChain being able to accomplish cross-chain liquidity and having an AMM is just one thing that it can do, and how it can contribute to the industry and contribute to the space. Is capable of doing much more. Now, if you want to keep things just to the AMM space, and effectively doing what Chainflip's doing, right? Chainflip's in the chat here. Chainflip's just doing the AMM thing, right? And that's their choice, and that's a respectable choice to be made, right? Now, do we want to sit in the same boat as Chainflip and just try to compete with them in some sense, and cross-chain liquidity, blah blah blah, swapping grades? Maybe some people feel that way, right? But if there's a capability to do something like a Savers or like a lending or something like this, of offering decentralized finance primitives for arbitrarily any chain or asset, especially for something as important as Bitcoin, there's a lot of value there to be gained by the industry. A lot of value. So it is up to not me or FamiliarCow or anybody else. It's up to the nodes and the community to decide which direction they want to go. And to be honest, neither perspective is right or necessarily wrong. It's just how you feel about things, right? So it's at some point in the future we can talk about these. So for example, lending is pretty close to the cap, right? It's 96.6 right now or something like this, right? So we might be talking about in the near future about what we want to do with lending. Now we could say we don't like THORFi and we don't want to go further down this road, so let's just sunset the feature and allow loans to be closed but not opened, and eventually lending will just kind of die out on its own. Maybe that's the thing that people want to do. Maybe people want to raise the cap or something.
But why is the community so split though? Because it seems a little bit polarizing when I go on Twitter and some people are like, "Oh, the devs, it's not decentralized because the devs were already kind of moving in this direction without approval." Like that's what I'm seeing, and I don't know if my timeline is just like that or everyone's is like that. But what is the polarization stemming from?
Well, first of all, devs can't do anything. Literally, they don't. in the end, the nodes control anything and everything. So devs just can't just move forward with anything without the nodes just either being complacent and just like not doing anything, or them just allowing it. Node operators to allow any and all changes, right? So that's one thing to be clear. The difference is, like, the reason why people are so polarized is because some people are more risk on and some people are more risk off, right? And I think for like people like Pluto and other people like especially on the 9 realm side, they're coming from a more like, let's just keep it simple and basic and do the basic AMM thing, whereas myself and Lena are more on the mentality of there's a lot we can do with this. Sky is a limit. Let's not just have THORChain be a $20 billion protocol. Let's be 100 billion, 200 billion, right? Like whatever. We can. My viewpoint, we can get there. That's in my personal 2 cents, right? But if you want to keep things, if people like Pluto or others want to keep things more basic and or whatever, I mean that's perfectly fine. But people are polarized because people are scared. In effect, like people are scared from, to use your Celsius BlockFi reference that you made earlier. People are scared because of Terra, collapse, blah blah blah. I mean, right? And like that's just the state of the industry as a whole, of just being more reserved, right, and more afraid of um, death spirals and things of the such.
So basically, what you're saying is you don't want Rune to be a pussy coin. You want to go for glory. That's what you're saying. That's funny because like Bruce,
Uh,
I say that as like jokingly but serious at the same time, because it's like, hey man, if you're here in crypto and you really want to change the world of finance, you can play it safe and like not do anything that's. I feel like there's so many of those protocols and coins out there, and it's like they know they can raise some money and they can get to a certain market cap, and then they become, people become exit liquidity for the founders. They're out, they got rich, but they didn't really make a true difference. And then it's just a fucking slow bleed all the way back down to 0 or 99% retracement over time, and then it's gone. Right. So I respect the fact that you guys are definitely trying to it sounds like evolve and adapt based off of tech upgrades that you guys are facilitating, right? It wasn't a part of the original vision with what you're saying, the THORFi, but it's like as you guys improve tech and then you view current market conditions and what other people have done and you've learned, you guys realize that you can also partake in, different feature builds and whatnot. So I get it. I'm in the software world myself. So I understand. It's like, there's a lot of different directions to take, and you're going to upset. You can't please all the people all the time is what it sounds like to me, more so than anything else. But there could be, so like one group of people could be upset, the original people who want to play it safe, but then you bring in a whole new batch of people into this ecosystem that want to use these other products. And I'm assuming in your vision, Chad, like that new group of people that gets onboarded is much larger than the group that's bitching or complaining today.
Well, I don't know what. I really don't have any sense of size, right? So you can make an argument that people are not investing in Rune because they don't like THORFi features, and you could make an argument that people are investing in Rune because of the THORFi features. And to be honest, I don't have a good sense of the size of either of those two parties, to be honest, right? Nor would I consider Rune to be a quote pussy coin or in it for the glory, as you said earlier in your message there. But like, it's not about. It's just about. I see, from my perspective, I see there's a lot of opportunity to do things that nobody else in the industry is capable of even doing. Most people in this industry aren't even have the stack to accomplish the things that we can accomplish. And what we can do theoretically is we can provide services that are critically important and critically valuable and far exceed everything else in the market, right? Let's just assume for a moment that lending works as designed, and just make the assumption just for 1 second. That would be one of the most important advancements in DeFi we've seen in fucking 5 years. Like, and I don't think you can reasonably argue with me on this, right? But that's obviously making the assumption that it works. And I don't know that it works. And we won't really actually know whether it works or not until the end of the next bear market, which was, 4 years away, or whatever the hell the number is, right? To be fair. So it's perfectly valid for people to have the viewpoints they have. And I understand what that is polarizing. And I don't want to drive a stake through the middle of the THORChain community on this topic, especially not now. Right now, I want to stay focused on, the things that are important for Q1 that we've already kind of talked about as a community and kind of generally agreed upon. It's not really controversial or whatever, like minimalist transactions and, getting, you know, uh, scalability. Like we just did Swap Our Club, for example, and that was like that significantly improved the speed at which trades and swaps are done on the network. So like at some point we can talk about those things. And to be honest, even much like Rune Vault 2.0, I'm not even sure I'm a fan of it. I haven't even read the issue personally. I know I kind of understand it at like a general high level, but there's questions and concerns, legitimate questions, legitimate concerns to have around it, and which just requires more time of research and understanding and vetting and blah 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 before we can actually like go down that road. But to be honest, nobody's really pushing for it to be done now or anytime soon, for that matter. Probably not even Q2. I wouldn't even want to see it within Q2 timeframe, right? If we see it at all, right? So, but for right now, I'm more focused on let's just fix bugs. Let's scale the network, right? Let's get ARBs to be more efficient. Let's get memoless transactions, maybe order books. I don't know what, but there's a lot to be done in the interim for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The short term and midterm alignment is all there, and like I mean, for myself personally, I really see the value in a lot of THORFi features. It's just making sure that things are safe for the network, and obviously you're not blowing up LPs through basically unhinged savers exposure, where they're taking on their own IL and savers IL essentially, and not having the risk of blowing up LPs or with lending, minting Rune, which is obviously like a core part of the mechanics behind it, which is why there's been so much research that went into like the design and implementation of the lending system. So it's like I don't know. I think the community is kind of in the middle, where it's not just like, oh, like we only need to be the AMM, which I'm sure there's some people that truly believe that, but at the same time, there's definitely a ton of room for innovation. But it's just doing things in a safe and scalable way, where there aren't going to be people that are completely blown up in the protocol doing it, especially with savers or lending. Like given the pure design of the protocol, with the AMM itself, the risk that the LP takes is impermanent loss, and it's changed a lot since the first days of the protocol, where now they're taking on their own IL risk and they take on savers IL risk, and we introduce things like protocol owned liquidity in order to decrease that risk, but protocol owned liquidity isn't infinitely scalable, right? So it's just like it's all just trying to answer the question, like, how do we curtail all of the risks of THORFi and make this thing just a incredibly powerful protocol, where obviously you can do the swaps, you can do savers, you can do lending, but do everything in a safe way where people still have access to the features, but in a way where things aren't going to go sideways given whatever kind of price action, because obviously if something can happen, then it will happen. So it's just protecting against all the risks that could potentially come in the next bear market, or who knows, like it could come whenever. So just making sure that people are protected, especially liquidity providers, which everything on THORChain is built around dual LP and pairing asset with Rune. So the question is just how to do that safely.
Yeah, how to do that safely, obviously. That's why we launch features, with caps. That's why we have backstop circuit breaker things that we have been talking about for a long time. But also, like, one of the reasons why we started to go down the THORFi road in general was just trying to address what we saw to be, what myself and at least Lena saw to be like problems with the currently really original design, meaning that, like, can we grow TVL to be a reasonably, higher amount. You're not going to become the biggest exchange in the world with 200 million in TVL. It's not going to happen. There's just not enough liquidity, right? And by kind of forcing everybody to be a dual LP and being exposed to Rune, the amount of people who are willing to be LPs is a lot less than somebody who's willing to do, Ethereum and USDC, for example, right? And that's what Chainflip has done. Like Chainflip has kind of opted to say, you know what, we're not going to force people to hold flip tokens to become dual LPs. We're going to have them be holders of USDC, and we're going to have them be holders of ETH or whatever. And by doing so, they're making a trade-off. They're saying, we're going to make it easier for people to be LPs in some sense, or be exposed to the assets they want to be exposed to. But at the same time, they're just going to say, we don't really care about economic security. So, and that's just the trade-off, right? And we could theoretically do the same thing if we really wanted to. Do we want to do away with economic security and start coming with new designs that allow us to scale TVL more so than it is now through that mechanism? I mean, there's not much of a taste for that, at least from my perspective, or anybody that I've spoken to. So, like, even like what we have, even if you just keep everything vanilla, it remains to be seen that is enough to accomplish the task of what this protocol is trying to accomplish. Fox McLeod, do you have something you want to add, or Tune?
Thank you for letting me speak. I have a little question, guys. With my appreciation to you, can THORChain and THORFi split in two different paths? This is my question.
Two different what?
Two different paths. Two different ways.
I mean, it could be forked into two different chains. That's a something we could discuss as a community at some point in the distant future. But parts within the same chain, I don't think so. The only way you could do that is you would need to create like two different tokens. There's like the Rune token, which is like the AMM, and then there's a new token called Rune THORFi. I don't know. But then you create a separation of the collective value that the protocol is pulling in. So it's theoretically possible, I suppose, but I'd have some concerns around it.
Thank
Hello.
you.
Hey, what's up,
Hey,
Dr.
how are you? Mike, can you guys hear me?
Yep, go for
My
it.
question is, how do you guys expect the future advances in THORChain to affect the price of Rune?
Yeah, I don't really have an answer to that question, to be honest. It's kind of a arbitrary question with no real answer to it.
Okay.
Like, I mean, I guess like if you think about it in terms of just the AMM side of things, Rune's price would move with its adoption, right? With its volume, right? If you think about it in terms of like THORFi, it's a different mechanism, and it has a different effect, right? And Rune's price would clearly do better, assuming that THORFi works and there's no calamities of any kind. Obviously, Rune's price would do better with THORFi than without it, because you have multiple demand centers for the asset. Right?
Yeah.
The more demand centers you have for an asset, or the more significant the size of those demand centers are, clearly the price would be relative to that. So if you keep things simple on the AMM side, Rune can still go to $100 theoretically. I'm not saying it is. No one quote me as I'm giving price predictions or anything like this. But even if you just leave the AMM by itself, could Rune go to $100? Yeah, that's totally possible. Totally possible. If you added, lending and other things with it, can it go higher than that? Yeah, absolutely. It's just Rune can be successful without THORFi, possibly, likely. I don't know. It's hard to say, to be honest. But like having more demand centers for an asset
Makes it more.
what
Yeah,
makes it more, and having legitimate demand centers. Obviously, like Terra doing like fixed rate 20%, blah blah blah, is not legitimate. But
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Hey guys, just joined here. This is Pluto. I'm just curious if we were to deploy the 60 million rune that's in the standby reserve into POL, doesn't that remove 60 million rune worth of organic demand? Like if the protocol is just putting up all the rune side, where's the demand coming from in THORFi?
sorry, I don't know what you mean by organic demand.
Like in just a traditional vanilla dual LP, people need to buy rune in order to provide the other side of the liquidity. If the protocol reserve is putting up all the rune and allowing savers to just enter with exogenous assets, how is THORFi actually creating demand for rune?
Oh, yeah. So the trade volume of the protocol is directly correlational, not necessarily in a one-to-one kind of way, with its TVL. So as you increase the TVL of a protocol, generally speaking, the volume goes with it, right? And this volume goes with it. You also get higher price execution, better price execution, right? Because the pool has more liquidity to it, and it's more capital efficient in a lot of ways. And so it's beneficial to the asset in general because you're going to naturally see a higher volume of trading and better price execution. But Savers was never really necessarily designed for causing rune price to go up necessarily. Its design primarily was to increase the TVL of the network, in which case it's done that quite successfully, rather successfully. Lending was more designed for the idea of like creating a strong demand center for the rune asset by creating more buy and burn pressure. That's more of what it was designed. It's a primary thing that it's trying to achieve in the lending design. But because lending has been very subdued in a sense, we've capped it at a very small cap, and over a long period of time, it hasn't had that effect, which is not really surprising either, because the goal of lending, over the last like few months or whatever, is not about trying to get rune's price to go to $30 or whatever. The goal was just to test the idea, to experiment do a small experimentation, and understand if the assumptions that are made in the design pan out to the market. Thus far, it's been true. Like everything about lending thus far has been nothing but green flags. There hasn't been a red flag in lending that I can remember right now. Everything's been green flags so far. It's been doing very well relative to what we expect it to do. The only thing that hasn't happened is some large market adoption of it, which, that's not going to happen with a 1% cap. Which is what we expected anyway.
Yeah, I just with POL, it's just like you're basically replacing organic demand for rune for providing the other side of dual-sided liquidity, and you're just basically saying, okay, that'll come from reserve, that'll come from supply that is currently not circulating. So what I feel like would be a better way to create organic demand for rune, I'm sure the word organic is not maybe the correct word, but to create actual demand for rune, people other than the protocol buying it and putting it into pools. And if you were to just take that 60 million in the standby reserve right now, like, because clearly the protocol works without that today. If you were to just take that and just burn the whole thing and reduce the supply of rune from, I don't know, whatever it is right now, total supply like 484 million, and you were to make that 424 million, like you're basically there's less rune now in circulation, and then people have to buy it in order to provide liquidity. Like I just don't see why like dual LP will work if the yields are high enough, if there is enough demand for swapping, cross-chain swapping, which is like the bread and butter of this protocol. It just naturally follows that people will provide liquidity. It will become attractive enough to the point where people will see it. Like I just want to see dual LPs making money again. And then like if they're making money again, it's because they don't have this like there's not like just rune being put into the pools by the protocol. It's people are actually like buying it to put it in there.
Yeah, but I think the thing you're missing is that it doesn't matter what the APYs are of being a dual LP if you just don't want to hold rune. Like you could put it 300 fucking percent. Doesn't matter. If you don't want to hold rune, you don't want to be price exposed to rune, then it doesn't matter if you're getting 300%. Just not worth the risk, right? And by the way, burning 60 million out of the standby reserve, A, does not reduce circulation. Circulation reserved funds do not include in circulation. But B, it wouldn't create any kind of long-term economic value. It would just create a tweet thread and maybe a short-term pump. Which, by the way, we did that a long time ago. We burnt originally the supply of Rune was 1 billion tokens. And back in I think 2019, I think it was, maybe early 2020, we burned half the supply, right? And did we see a massive bump in price? Yeah, there was a bump, but it wasn't. I don't even think that the price doubled from memory. That was a long time ago, though, so maybe I'm misremembering. But it's not a sustainable. It doesn't create sustainable growth in the protocol by burning 60 million or whatever.
Yeah, I'd just rather see that never go into circulation in the first place.
Yeah, and the reason why you're saying that is because you're looking at Rune in terms of its monetary policy, and I get why you're looking at things that way, and I think you'd be probably in the commonality in that sense. But the reality is that Rune is not a money, right? It's never been designed to be a money, right? It's not trying to compete against Bitcoin, right, or anything like this. It's barely even a fucking utility. It's really there primarily to offer security more than any other thing, and offer more capital efficient ways of not having 1,000 different Bitcoin pools with 1,000 different pairs or whatever. So it has a role, but its role is not primarily to be a money that has a good monetary policy like Bitcoin does or whatever else. Like, there's a part of me that thinks that, like, if I were to do it all over again, then I wouldn't maybe not even create a cap on Rune supply just because it distracts from what it's actually trying to achieve. Right, you're investing into Rune not because you think it's a good store of value. You're investing in it because you believe that it's going to be adopted into the future and get more trade volume and have more demand for it, right? Because the tokenomics of Rune is designed in a way that its growth moves with the growth of the protocol, unlike Uni token or Sushi or these other DeFi tokens that are just governance tokens. But again, like I haven't even read that whole proposal of the 60 million thing. That's an idea that somebody floated in a concept of. I haven't even read it, to be honest.
Hey, Mariano, what's up?
So I want to segment into the roadmap and couple that with the recent discussion on the dual LP and the 2.0 idea. I've seen rapid swaps stream, and it seems like we could do a lot of volume without much TVL. So firsthand, I would put the priority first to discuss how to get there faster instead of thinking that TVL will mean the world. There could
When
be
you
a
say how to
decoupling
get
of
there faster, what do you mean?
instead of like wasting. I mean, not wasting, but instead of picking fights over this dual LP discussion, see how the protocol works after rapid swaps. If there will be a necessity to give LPs the non-Rune option as the priority, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So once we deliver, once devs deliver rapid swaps, we can do a cross check to see if the TV, like the pros and cons are still there for any big switch. I think another wait. So my question, let me step back a little bit. My question is, how did this discussion start, and how after this ADR, how it will evolve? Will it eventually go to the, if it doesn't pass, how does the governance take this into account, in the back end by the development teams on the dual LP discussion, if we're going to eventually so my point I'm trying to make is, first, I would prioritize, rapid swaps. I think that makes a huge difference for capital efficiency, execution, all that good stuff. And then, segment that into how governance works in a way that how would we do this even before rapid swaps in a way.
Yeah, this stuff is definitely not put in front of all this new like Rune Vault and things like that are not put in front of things like order books. Like order books is on the near term priority list, so like Q1, Q2 list of priorities to go out, and rapid swaps is, I believe, part of the order book design. So that's something that's already like coming in the short to midterm over the next couple of months. So that's already something that's like in motion and happening right now. And like as for how we kind of got here is just a like proposal from from one of the devs for this thing, which I believe it was originally presented as like this is what's happening, and then and then it kind of got into like, well, not everyone really agrees with this direction, so now it's kind of just like, here's this proposal, and eventually there's probably there'll be some kind of vote on this, probably an ADR happening over the next couple weeks or months, but definitely not trying to distract from the short to midterm priorities of shipping things like order books, which includes rapid swaps, memoless transactions, batched outbounds, and all the things that are like actual priorities that can present an improvement over the entire design right now, that are entirely non-controversial and already determined to be an area of focus for the next couple months.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I just think that the rapid swap is going to be one of the major impacts on how much volume can go through. Streaming swaps was probably the first step there, but streaming swaps in combination with normal synth speed swaps is definitely a game changer. And I think Lena talked about how synth mints are actually positive for Rune, supposed to mint to pump Rune, which kind of contradicts what Chad recently said, that synths weren't really meant to pump Rune, lending was, but synth burns actually dumps Rune. So what she said, I don't know if she or he, that we should all stop with the POL matching synth mints and let Saver's TVL increase, which THORChain makes money with TVL, which is something I kind of disagree with once we have rapid swaps, because it's kind of like a just-in-time liquidity, if you will, for arbitragers, which will kind of sandwich with the order books. If they don't order book, they will as they will do synth, and if synths are gone, they will do L1 arbing. So it kind of still extracts away the value that LPs get, and that's a good thing. That means we can process a lot of more value. Just want to make sure there that I made my point about how much volume can go through, and thank God that we'll have rapid swaps before any of this potentially goes through.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I'd say to that is that if you have a car, right, and you want to upgrade your car and make it faster, as a race car or whatever, you can't just focus on one component of the car, right, like the muffler, right, or the how many, whatever. Like, you have to think holistically, and so as you upgrade, one component, you probably want to upgrade a different component, right, because the other component becomes the bottleneck of the speed of the car or the performance of the car. You don't just want to keep on focusing on, upgrading the engine, but never touch the wheels or its aerodynamics or other things, right? And so, like, what we've always said for many years now is that the three kind of important pillars of the protocol is that we always want to be scaling security, we want to be scaling TVL, and we want to be scaling volume, right? And we do this through many mechanisms or many ways of accomplishing these things, but we're constantly kind of like shifting a position on what thing we're focusing on, right? We used to focus on security during the bear market when security was a problem. We focused on TVL with savers until savers launch, and we haven't been focused on that for a while now. And ever since that, we've been focusing mostly on swaps, which is what streaming swaps came, and maybe rapid swaps, another example of that, so forth and so on. So it's just like we have to think holistically and think about what is the bottleneck of the protocol and how do we improve that, right? That whatever that thing might be, and it's going to shift and it's going to change. It's going to be like whack-a-mole. As soon as you improve the volume, you're going to want to improve the effectiveness of the TVL, the effectiveness of the ARBs, and so we're constantly kind of shifting positions or shifting focus more accurately to improve one component so that because it's the largest bottleneck of the protocol. Largely, I've been focused on not volume ever since streaming swaps. I've been not focusing on TVL. I've been not focused on security. I've actually been mostly focusing on ARBs myself over the last month or two to make them faster, more efficient, more be able to get their confirmation counts done put into the network quicker, to get their outbound transactions out faster by Swapper Cloud, trader counts, another thing to increase capital efficiency of ARB so they can ARB with 2x more efficiency than they're currently doing with synthetics. And and again, even with the rapid swaps, another thing to make arbitrage bots more effective, to make them to scale the protocol and that methodology and that perspective. But we're gonna always just be like every few months or 6 months or whatever it is to be like, all right, we've now maxed out the efficiency of ARBs. We've added 4 new features to make ARBs faster, better, so we have better price execution, you have better volume, that kind of thing. And maybe you want to focus to something else at that point.
Yeah, it makes sense. Just to wrap that up, for us investors of Rune, it would be much better to have higher TVL that would correlate with price due to deterministic pricing and incentive pendulum and a speculative multiple on top of the deterministic price. So, all gears towards that for sure. Thank you, guys.
And one thing that I guess we should address real quick, because I see a lot of comments on this, and obviously on Discord too, just about Twitter comms. So like obviously there's a lot of contributors. There's a couple different contributors to the THORChain Twitter account, and people post things on here. Like I post things. Others do too, and no one should take anything that's posted on this account as fact. But at the same time, we definitely need to do better, just making sure that the mouthpiece of the protocol, which obviously this is not an official account, it doesn't speak for the protocol. Only the nodes can speak for the protocol. But at the same time, a lot of people look towards this account and obviously like the community for the signal of like what's going on. And when the Twitter account says like this thing is happening, or this is what is going to happen, when that's not like an agreed upon decision, or that is not the clear direction that things are moving in, or it's a controversial decision, or whatever. I believe that the Twitter account should only be posting things that are in the will of the node operators and the devs at that time. So it's like if things can change, things will change over time inevitably. But obviously, we just need to do better as a community to make sure that people understand that there's always gonna be these proposals like, hey, we should do this, we should do that, but just having clear communications, because this is where people get their signal of like what's happening, and it confuses people when they see things that like, oh, this is happening, like I don't understand what this is, or what it's so sudden, when in reality, if changes were to take place, they'd be many months from now after a lot of discussion and decision. But it's just not the place of the Twitter to be saying things to happen as they could be in the future, without some kind of like clear signal of that is the direction which everyone agrees to go down. So yeah, I mean that's something I take upon myself too, just to like make sure that the sort of Twitter comms are clean and factual and professional. But obviously there's other contributors too, so just want everyone to keep that in mind. But I'm going to continue to do my best to, provide good comms for the community and make sure there's clear signal on like what people agree upon and what I interpret as the direction of the protocol, as agreed upon by the nodes and the devs and the greater community. So just wanted to call that out because I see a lot of people that are just confused about things that this account tweets out when maybe not all of it will, come to fruition one day. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would just say that, like, for better or for worse, like when you operate a truly decentralized network, these types of hiccups happen, solely due to the fact that there is not some centralized figure or authority who's kind of calling the shots. Like, it does consist of multiple stakeholders, each that have their own preferences that sometimes pull in different directions. Except the part that what we can do better on is sort of aligning internally on those things first. And so, like, ideally, like, the Twitter should not be a place where other devs learn about other devs' ideas and proposals. Those conversations should happen outside of the view of the public. And then once the idea is fully formed and ready to be taken to sort of the next tier of feedback, it should be taken within, the Discord dev community, which contains longtime contributors, nodes, investors, LPs. And then once all of that sort of semi-public discussion happens, which again, that discussion is completely public, but it's still like not as public as Twitter. Only once there's like full consensus within the community should things be happening on the actual public Twitter. Public Twitter should just be like, honestly, discussing things that either already have consensus and will certainly happen in the near-term future, or things that already have happened. Like, for example, I would love to see us talking about Swapper Cloud, for example. And I did join a little bit late, but that was a major thing that went out this week. I'm sure you guys already touched on, but it's always going to be better to just keep this forum to like factual, looking into the past or into the very near future of things that absolutely will be happening.
Yeah, 100%. It looks chaotic because, obviously there's a lot of contributors that do their own thing and have their own like idea of the way to do things. But I totally agree. Like the flow of information should always be, someone has an idea, they, talk to others in private on, the merits of that idea and develop it into a proposal. And then that goes to GitLab, someone makes an issue, and then people start talking about it on Discord and Twitter Spaces and things like that. I feel like that's a good discussion, a good place to talk about things that are, maybe just proposals, but they're, slightly formed or more fully formed than just like an original idea. And then once there's some kind of consensus on like, hey, this is a good idea, or like this seems solid enough where there's at least going to be a vote on it, then that kind of moves to the public forum of Twitter, where there's like, there's so many eyes here, and what people see is just kind of chaos, or they think that something's happening when in reality it's just like a proposal or something that may not ever come to fruition, or it's just one person's idea. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. But yeah, we'll continue to try and strive for the great standard of comms that I think we all want. So keep pushing in that direction.
Well, let's hear from Ken, and then after Ken, we can move on to Swapper Cloud, because we actually haven't really talked about that quite yet.
Yeah. Let's do let's do Eric first, and then Ken. Eric's been waiting, and then let's talk about Swapper Cloud and some other things. You there, Eric? Yeah.
Hi, give me one. Oh, no, yeah. No, so, hey, sorry about that, guys. So appreciate you let me talk. I had like two questions. One, because I remember hearing someone say that the lending part was kind of like a test, like kind of we were testing the lending. So one question was for that was it considered for like physical assets, like for example how banks can provide or title loans, right? So a physical asset is collateral as well. Did you guys possibly take that or think about that for an option as well for investors?
No, we don't deal with any kind of physical assets. We're purely in the crypto space. If you try to get into the physical world, it just becomes points of centralization and against the ethos of the project.
Understood. Okay. Um, okay, no, then that kind of eliminates my next question. I appreciate it. The one thing I did want to know was actually uh, if because I want to be a part of this project and I want to contribute to it a whole lot. However, I don't have any type of coding experience. I don't know how to any of this the talents and skills that you guys hold, but I do have knowledge and resources in the real estate world. And even though you guys said you as the project doesn't take part in it, if I were to have started a company and I wanted to be a part of it, would that something like that? Because I want to get housing and the profits and benefits to the housing markets into the project, at least the money wise revenue into it. I want to start generating money from housing into THORChain. And if that would be the only way that I would be able to contribute, would something like that also have to be as a proposal, or would we talk basically at the Rare Evo event? Because I ended up buying my ticket there too. So let me know.
Yeah, I'll just hop into this one because I've actually thought about a lot about this as well, and how like THORChain lending can, displace the need for people to sell off their Bitcoin to make investments in other asset classes. So like you can, for example, I don't think anything that you're talking about is going to get added into the core protocol of THORChain, but you could potentially, create some sort of package of real estate assets, refinance them using Bitcoin loans from THORChain lending. So basically, like collect Bitcoin from LPs, then take out loans on THORChain using LPs Bitcoin, and then use those assets to refinance mortgages on real world assets, or just buy assets outright and then basically pay back your LPs as you pay off those loans from the actual revenue that you make from them. There's tons of businesses that can be built on top of THORChain, but there's no chance whatsoever that there's going to be real estate assets added to THORChain. And I can probably say pretty definitively that that's just not, to Chad's point, it goes against the ethos of the protocol.
Okay, no, understood, and I totally love what your point and everything that you just said. Like the plan, I'm gonna have to go over that and research it a little bit more. But I love the process that you just explained. So I'm gonna dig deeper and then reach back out on the next one. Appreciate you guys. Much love.
Thanks, man. What's up, Cam?
What's up, guys? Been a very interesting week for THORChain. I'm glad to feel like the project is the real thing. Like people are arguing over the roadmap and everything. So the way I understand is when we look at the near term upgrades, I kind of summarize them in three buckets. It's like memoless transactions, Swapper Cloud, which you guys are going to talk about next, and then there's the order books. Out of those three, the one that kind of excites me the most is the order books. I kind of want to hear more about where the consensus is at regarding its design and implementation. Whether there's an agreement to a certain level between 9 Realms and the core team with regards to those its details. Some of the things I'm curious to learn about is basically I saw a proposal about this quote unquote a new asset type as known as trade assets, which would be a more capital efficient asset to use relative to synths when to do ARBs and place place limit orders. So how confident we are in terms of adopting trade assets. That would be one question. And the reason just for context, the reason I'm interested in this is because I think I want to underscore like Mariana's point here. I feel like, with streaming swaps, like they really unlocked a big opportunity for THORChain. Like before streaming swaps, it was like, in my mind, it was like TVL was one of the top priorities, right? Like the pool sizes. However, like with streaming swaps, if you break down a swap into 10, the pools, like the effect of pools is almost it's like 10 times bigger. And if you break it down to the 200, you can like treat pools as if like they're 100x deeper. And like with order books, like there's a very plausible plan to make streaming swaps like shorter. So I feel like, like double clicking on what Mariana said, I feel like, once it's out there and we experience the results out there, we're quickly going to realize that like the THORChain like doesn't need that larger pools in order to get where it wants to be. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
Well, I think the design of order books was pretty much established at this point. It's already been coded, and there hasn't really been any pushback from any of the other devs or community members about its implementation details. It's actually been in the code for a long time. There's some new things to be added to support streaming swaps within order books, and that kind of like some work to be done around that. But you're right in the sense that streaming swaps kind of allows you to have the price execution of pools that are 10 times deeper and getting it getting it now in a sense, and that's fair, and that's an accurate thing to say. But you also get like if the pools were 2 times deeper right now, streaming swaps would be executed twice as fast, right? Now rapid swaps might be to have execute even faster, and that's kind of what the idea behind them. But it also requires arbitrage bots to be like mature enough to support such a thing, right? It doesn't guarantee that every swap will be executed in a single block. It requires arbitrage bots to be to show up, and do their job, right? In a sense.
Yeah, that's fair, but like I think there's the very, very real chance that they will be, because that there's just dollar to be made, right? And like in my mind, it's just like I almost see it as like a not AMM, but it is liquidity that organic swaps will trade against, right? So like there's going to be orders, limit orders, and then there's going to be organic swaps. An organic swap is going to execute against the pool immediately after. If the price satisfies the limit order, the limit order is going to execute against the same pool but in the different direction. And so like it's just going to increase the liquidity and make swaps faster. And because you can update your limit order at perhaps like every block, like you can be very sophisticated with that. Like you're not going to necessarily like you're not going to experience the IL for sure that you experience in an AMM. And I feel like that plan is like a very real, very, very plausible, and like it's a very exciting plan with regards to like how THORChain can become like the big project that we all want it to be.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But you can here's the bear case for that, right? Chainflip's in the audience, and so Chainflips has a different model. Instead of using streaming swaps, they're using JIT, which is another legitimate way of approaching the same problem in some ways. And like it's possible that Chainflip could have better price execution than THORChain if it has deep enough pools, right? So we could have more shallow pools than Chainflip, but still have better price execution. But that's probably not true if Chainflip has 10 times the pool depth that we do, to be honest with you, right? Depending upon a bunch of different kind of variables that are being taken into account. But I think I definitely agree with you in the sense that I find rapid swaps, or the concept of rapid swaps, to be pretty valuable, and I'm excited to see that happen, and something I'd love to see happen in Q1, maybe Q2. and I definitely want to do that before making any changes that Rune Vault or anything like this. Like that's I'm not interested in those things. I'd much rather do limit orders and rapid swaps before we touch anything like that. I'm with you, Chan.
Yeah, if anyone doesn't know what rapid swaps are, it's doing a streaming swap, but using the order book or people that place limit orders or our bots that place limit orders on THORChain, basically filling a streaming swap all entirely within one block. So instead of needing to wait for arbs to come in after you make the swap, the arbs have already placed have already placed limit orders where they can make a profit arbing to other exchanges or decentralized exchanges. So you can essentially just fill in your streaming swap in one block. So you can get guaranteed execution and instant execution for your streaming swap. So you're still paying those 5 basis points of slippage, but you have that guaranteed and instant execution. So it's kind of the best of both worlds for streaming. And quick question on the implementation of limit orders / order books. Is that still on top of synthetic assets, or are those built on top of derived assets or trade assets, or what's the primitive that order books are built on top of? Because it seems like we're kind of moving away from synthetic assets besides in the context of savers. So what's the basis of order books right now?
At the time that the order book code was written, the thought process that was going to be around synthetics, and the reason why that is if you do it around the layer 1 assets, you have unsecured assets on the network. You could do it, like there's something technically stopping you from doing so, but now you're holding Bitcoin outside of the context of the AMM itself, and therefore it's not like properly secured unless you have additional mechanisms to secure it. So, but I think that the intention now is to use trade accounts instead of synthetics, and so we're going to be launching trade accounts probably fairly soon as a project, and I think everybody seems to be for it, and there hasn't been much pushback at all. Probably in the next few weeks or month or so, we'll probably have trade accounts that won't obviously support order books off the bat, but initially it'll just be for arbs to use primarily, but at some point downstream, another month or two, whatever hell it's going to be, we'll open it up so that you can use order books with trade accounts.
I'll just offer my view on it. I love order books. I want to see order books in THORChain. Of course, it's a trading primitive that a lot of people are familiar with, and it does unlock things like rapid swaps, and just it brings us closer to parity with centralized exchanges, which I think we can all agree is what we're trying to disrupt. It does it does give me pause that they are built on top of synths now, because we're actively trying to move things away from synths. Like there's somewhat of a sentiment in the community held by myself and others that synth leverage is already too high, and that by introducing order books as a feature, it just adds more demand for synths. And it doesn't seem like launching a feature that relies on synth capacity while simultaneously trying to scale back synth utilization. It just seems like you're introducing one feature that cannibalizes the capacity of another. You're going to have people who are trying to add savers simultaneously taking away from the capacity available for order books, and vice versa. So it just does seem like a bit of a cannibalization effort there. I personally, I would love to see if there was, I think there other designs have been floated. For example, the idea of a liquidating order book, where your part of your order can get partially liquidated if the price of some asset falls below a certain amount. We obviously scrapped that idea because that would be a horrible user experience for people to place a limit order, and then it's your limit order didn't get filled, but you now have less than you put in. But I think one area that we could potentially explore is just the idea of an expiring limit order where we allow limit orders and we just allow people to post just the exogenous asset without actually having to swap it to a synth or affect the synth utilization up to the security limit. which we have plenty of security right now. We're currently very over bonded. And so that would, shift the incentive pendulum back towards, if we just allowed people to post exogenous assets, we could just use the existing over bonded rune to secure that. So limit orders would really just be capped at the amount of excess security at any given moment. And then as we start to approach that amount of the security cap, we could just start expiring limit orders to basically kick them back out. So, I mean, because limit orders are naturally a short-lived thing, at least I've seen some people just like throw on a bunch of orders at like a really, really low price and they never get executed, but people want to have them there so that, if the price of an asset does dip, they can fill it a low amount. But I think it would be more, it would encourage people. So I guess what I'm saying is that you could like eject or expire a limit order if it's far away from the spot price as we approach that security cap. And then that way, you wouldn't have to do anything you wouldn't have to change the synth utilization in order to allow people to place limit orders. And I think wouldn't be a terrible user experience if someone like paid a fee, to basically place a limit order, or rather, what it could be, you wouldn't even have to put the fee to place a limit order. It's just that if your limit order expired due to not being filled after a certain amount of time, all you'd basically having to be doing is paying the outbound fee to send you back your asset. Is there any reason why something like that wouldn't work, Chad? Because I would love if we could avoid having to lean on synths for any more features.
Yeah, like I said, trade accounts will be used for ARBs and for order books. I don't think we're going to be using synths for. That was the original design, like back when we first talked about order books, like over a year ago. But I think today we wouldn't use synths at all for this. So you could actually just deposit some Bitcoin, which basically gets automatically traded into a trade account, which is a 1-to-1. There's no fee for that, and then it just sits as a trade asset on the network, waiting for execution of some price that you're waiting for, the Bitcoin ETH price to hit some ratio, whatever the hell it is, and then it goes ahead and executes, and we can also have just a global expiry, you can't have an order, longer than 3 days. I don't know. I'm making up a kind of a random example, but in that way, if security does become an issue, within a few short days, all that kind of exits, and maybe you won't be able to build new order book items just because of security concerns. I don't know. We can think more of the details, the weeds of that, but yeah, I don't think we're going to be using synths for order books.
Yeah, I mean the problem with trade accounts is that the asset in your trade account can be liquidated if the price of Rune drops relative to the asset that it's securing. Correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I think
when we discussed the original implementation of trade accounts, we said that that's an acceptable thing because ARBs are relatively advanced. They're very advanced, actually. They're probably the most advanced actor in the ecosystem, certainly more so than Savers, which is kind of just like I said it and forget it. Trade accounts actually have to monitor the sort of that point at which they get liquidated. But it's fine because the trade accounts and synths that are held by ARBs are meant to be relatively short-lived. They're just, their only purpose of holding them is to rebalance the pools. But if you have, basically we want to avoid building any product that requires someone who sets a limit order to actually have to monitor whether the capital that they posted in their limit order might get liquidated. So that's why I was just thinking instead of even ever getting them, if there was some special mechanism that prevented that from ever happening, it just ejected their order and basically refunded it less the outbound fee back to the user if they were ever anywhere remotely in danger of getting to that point, and then potentially not allowing new limit orders when you're below 10% or whatever from the security cap, then that would at least provide a user experience that prevents people who place limit orders from being liquidated. And I do like the idea of, essentially ejecting the people who are furthest from the spot price first, because they're the ones who are least likely to get their order filled, and so best eligible for having their order ejected.
Yeah, I do think there's some implementation details to be ironed out, and to be honest, I haven't really thought about it in any kind of depth quite yet, because I haven't been focused on trade accounts, the union of trade accounts and order books. That's just like we're a ways away from that mentality. But you're right. One thing to clarify though, there's no like liquidation. It's more accurate to call it like a negative interest is applied to the trade account. It's not like we hit some number and then all of a sudden you lose all your trade accounts, you get zeroed or anything like
Sorry,
that.
yeah, like a partial liquidation. I mean, you're losing some of the principal that you put in. Like, we
Yeah,
don't want people to put a 1 Bitcoin order, and then we say, oh, sorry, you only have like 0.9 Bitcoin because trade accounts. That's like not an acceptable explanation from a UX perspective.
right. And that's partially why I was talking a moment ago about, if we have a cap on the number of days that an order item can be on the DEX, right? Which is what a lot of other DEXs have done in the past. That's pretty common. Then because the math of how the negative interest works, it's not aggressive at all. It's actually quite weak in its way that it approaches it for the most part. So it's fairly small, and so the order would expire within a day or 2 days or 3 days, or whatever the hell the number might be. And if you do get some kind of negative interest, you're not going to lose like half of your fucking position, whatever. That would be pretty extreme, but it would be rather quite small. I think it's going to be designed to be quite small. It doesn't need to be harsh to achieve its goal.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and at this point, it feels like we're just kind of going back and forth on implementation details. I think for anyone like joining late, this is kind of goes to show that, like, until a design is sort of agreed upon, things are still very much fluid at all times. And so, the introduction of new primitives like trade accounts kind of changes the implementation of order books. And so, like, and it's also like not the kind of thing where we have one chance to get it right. I think order books and their users will be sort of highly experimental, and ARBs and advanced people, advanced actors will be sort of the beta users of those. So as with every feature that we launch on THORChain, it'll be a staggered rollout, and we'll monitor the behavior and see how people react and respond before at least trying to like roll it out to UIs and stuff. We'll certainly see how other users use the feature.
Oleg, what's up, man? Sorry to keep you waiting up here.
Hi guys, hi everyone. Yeah, I have a few questions on a few topics. So if you wanted to just continue, Cal, I'll just ask my questions as we touch the topics. I know you mentioned going to Swapper Cloud next.
Yeah, we have a couple of people that are requested too. So let's talk about Swapper Cloud, and then if people have related questions, like I don't want to go back to like the previous topics of like THORFi and stuff like that. So let's just keep it kind of moving forward here. Let's talk about Swapper Cloud a little bit, because we finally turned on Swapper Cloud earlier this week. And so Swapper Cloud is live. So let's kind of dive into like what Swapper Cloud is, and what kind of improvement that should make over the swap experience. How to get Swapper Cloud, and like just what that means for the protocol in general, and then what the plan is for scaling up Swapper Cloud.
Yeah, I would love to talk about Chad was the one that wrote the code for it, but it's probably the feature that I'm most excited about, other than streaming swaps, because again, it's one of those things that just enhances the core product offering of THORChain, which is of course cross-chain swaps. So anybody who's swapped through THORChain, in the last couple months has probably experienced a pretty long delay between when their swap actually completes and when they receive their funds. And that's due to the scheduled outbound queue which is basically a defensive measure that was introduced as a result of a number of security enhancements that were made over the last few years. But basically, the idea behind this, the scheduled queue, is that if anyone were ever to try to attack THORChain in any way, we would basically have up to 1 hour to detect those and allow the community to flag it and basically pause trading during that time while an investigation takes place. So the only reason why swapping isn't super fast on THORChain already today is because of the decentralized nature of the protocol. And in wanting to constantly improve the user experience of swappers, we're constantly looking at ways to balance the trade-off between that user experience and security of the network. And because we are a decentralized network, and because we can't just pause things instantaneously or roll out patches quickly, we want to take an overly defensive network posture to security that, for better or for worse, centralized exchanges don't really have that limitation. So basically, Swapper Cloud was built as a feature to counteract the negative effects of a different feature. It just so happens that those two features have opposite but both equally relevant standing for the protocol, which is, again, balancing the user experience with the security of the network. So what Swapper Cloud does is it basically keeps track of all of the liquidity fees paid by each from and to asset addresses for every asset that's ever taken place on THORChain. So this even includes transactions that happened in the past. We backfilled all of the liquidity fees and applied those retroactively to every address that's ever transacted on THORChain. So if you've already paid $1 million, $2 million worth of liquidity fees, it's likely that you're a legitimate user. It increases the bar for what an attacker would have to do. They would basically have to swap tens of millions of dollars through the network in order to get this discount. But and so this discount doesn't apply to the majority of swappers. But importantly, what it does do is it excludes the volume from those transactions from the security feature. And because half of the volume that takes place on THORChain is arbitrage volume, formerly arbitrage volume and just organic swapper volume, say Joe Swapper from Trust Wallet, their volumes would both count equally towards engaging that security measure, the scheduled outbound delay. And so basically what this does is this kind of looks at it and says, okay, this ARB bot has been swapping back and forth on the network, and they've generated millions of dollars of liquidity fees, and so they're receiving tons of utility from the protocol. And so basically, we're not going to count their volume towards that scheduled outbound queue. So in that sense, both the ARB is getting a better, they're basically getting better execution because they're not waiting as long, but also everyday swappers who are just swapping through wallets are getting better or faster execution because the total amount of volume that's being looked at is lower due to the ARB volume being excluded from the security feature. So it's really kind of like a novel concept. Most people don't need to know about this at all, but it's just something that everyday swappers are going to get much faster. It's not actually execution time. The swaps actually execute quite quickly, even on an unbounded streaming swap. The most I've seen, certain swaps go for under millions of dollars is around 30 blocks or so, which is 3-4 minutes. So the swap itself actually executes after 3 or 4 minutes, but it sits in this queue waiting to be flagged if it is a suspicious transaction by anyone in the community. And if not, there's no reason that it needs to be sitting there that long. And so what this feature does is it basically allows us to, get things moving faster. And the last point I'll make on that is that, there's ways that we can, we could just get rid of the scheduled outbound delay today, but that wouldn't be a very prudent security posture. That said, as the protocol continues to ossify, and you'll hear me talk about a lot about this because it's, I think, like where we should eventually try to get to, where we're not releasing new features, we're just, letting things run, because that allows us to actually scale back these security measures to allow things to move through the network more quickly and process more volume. So basically, this entire journey has been a balancing act between security and user experience, and we're just now starting to feel comfortable enough and shipping features like Swapper Cloud to be able to start to pare back some of those things to provide a better UX.
So right now it's rolled out and to a smaller value than the final value is. So I believe we've rolled it out to a Swapper Cloud maximum value of 50K rune, which means it would apply up to a swap with the value being 50,000 rune. Or how exactly do these caps work in relation to like the rollout of Swapper Cloud and scaling it up to what the bug bounty is?
Yeah, so the on any particular outbound, you have like a clout number. Say your clout number is 200K rune, just for the sake of discussion. Any one particular outbound could only use 50K of that 200K. So you could use the full 200K, in a short period of time if you had, 4 outbound transactions, but you couldn't use it all in one transaction. And so the original intention, at least how I was thinking about it, was just to have the outbound, this kind of cap be the same as the bug bounty, which makes logical sense. But I think like once we've launched the Swapper Cloud concept, we can now look on chain to see like, are we even using the 50K? Or even like, are we actually getting anything by increasing it to 200 or 250 or whatever it is? And so I think what I'm just doing is, and I think Orion, who's also in the audience here, will help me with, is that maybe in about a week's time or 2 weeks' time, we'll do an analysis, and we'll do two things. One is to figure out how often, how frequently are we hitting that 50K cap, and out of as percentage wise. And then the second thing we want to just analyze is how much effect is Swapper Cloud having on the outbound queue? How much is it reducing on average, or either as an average or as a median? How is it reducing the time delay of the delayed outbound? And so we can compare last week to this week, and see the differences, like see how much of an improvement on the average time that swaps are waiting to be sent out. So I think at this point I'm just going to wait like a week or two and just kind of let the network collect some data, and then I'll probably work with Orion to do some analysis around it.
Yeah, but so far, just based on the swaps that we've looked at, the majority of the ones that are getting stuck for up to an hour in the scheduled outbound queue are ones that would not have benefited from any higher of a clout limit. So meaning those are just like new wallets making large swaps through, they basically haven't transacted before, so they're not even eligible for the Swapper clout. So yeah, I mean, we'll just have to collect some data and see whether it even needs to be raised higher than it is.
Correct. It may not need it, but we'll make that decision based upon what the data tells us.
I had two quick questions around the Swapper Cloud, just so you can get some perspective. If I'm doing a $1,000 swap, $1,000 rune, say, of value in a swap, how much cloud am I getting? Is it just depending on the volume that I sent through, or is it strictly depending on?
Chad, I think a good way to answer the question would be, how much do you need to have swapped through THORChain for your transaction to bypass the security measure for a $1,000 swap? Maybe that's a good way to phrase it.
Well, the Swapper Cloud number increases with the amount of fees you're paying in the trade or swap. So if you're doing 1,000 swap and you're paying 5 bips, it's that 5 bips that's increasing your number. So in order to get to that point where you're doing 1,000 whatever, you'd have to make that trade. What is it, 50 times or something? Or is it not 50 times? It's for 400 times. Is that the number is something like this, about 400 times, something like that.
So basically, if you transacted $400,000 through THORChain from an address that we've seen before, we don't throttle your outbound. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair, but it also matters of like what the fees you pay, because if you do a streaming swap, obviously you'll pay less in fees, and by doing so, you get less of a swap, you get less clout for that. But if you did a non-streaming swap, you did like a regular swap, you'll pay more in fees, in which case your swap clout is greater. So you could do it instead of doing 400 times, you could do it maybe 200 times if you just paid more in fees.
Yeah, I get that. I'll be right back. Continue on.
Also brought up Alfonso here. Are you there?
Hello, yes. How are you,
Hey.
my friends? 2 questions. The first one is when Thor USD will be available for everyone. And the second one is what is the possibility to put Luna and UST again in the protocol? Thank you.
So for the first question, my intention is it's not called Thor USD, it's called Tor, by the way, TOR. But my personal intention, is just my personal opinion, is to let Tor kind of operate for 6 to 12 months, which it's already been about 6 months so far. But let it operate for 6 to 12 months, let it kind of show how effective the peg is, so we can kind of, as much as we can, prove to the community of its viability. And then we'll do an ADR vote on it, right? And the community will vote it down or vote it up, whichever direction it chooses to vote it.
Yeah, before we even get to that point, I would like to see like more chains, more reliable chains with more USD based assets on THORChain before we even consider that. And also, we should make some tweaks. Like, for example, we should pause minting or redeeming of Tor when there's any less than 2 or 3 pools in the Tor peg, in the Tor anchor pool. I think one thing we noticed recently when there was a number of chain halts, like we had both Ethereum and AVAX halted, and so the only USD anchor asset that was available was like a single pool, and people were still able to mint and redeem Tor using just a single pool to provide that peg. So I think obviously that's undesirable. I would like to see like at least 6 stable coins across like 4 different unique chains with like proven reliability before we release Tor. I think Tor is one of those things that can greatly benefit the network, but it should only be launched once we're certain that we can keep all the chains live, constantly. And it's good that we recently went through a lot of these growing pains, which were the result of record transaction throughput on chains like AVAX and BSC, because those kind of forced us to meet those scaling challenges. So right now we're once again in like a hardening phase where the work we're doing now around stability will actually impact our ability to ship features like Tor in the future.
I think I agree with Pluto in the sense of adding more chains would be good. The more anchors we have to Tor, the stronger the stronger the peg is, the stronger the token is, the more reliable it is. I'm not sure I'd agree with the thing of like having a minimum of 2 or 3. It's actually, at least in my view, it's perfectly fine to have it down to 1. We had the BUSD the other day because AVAX and ETH were both paused. Whenever you trade pause trading, those get dropped from the kind of calculation for obvious reasons. But also what happens is the depth of the Tor pool also goes down. So usually it's around 6 million in depth, and during that time it was down closer to 2, which means that the fees are going to be higher, right? It's harder to price manipulate because the fees are going to be much higher, and in the calculation of the depth even the sub calculation of that depth that's starting at 2, and it can be 1.5 or 1 or less than 1 million, based upon the volume relative to the depth of the pool. So it should be fine and safe even to do a single asset. Obviously, you don't want to sustain that for long periods of time for obvious reasons, because you don't want that one token to like BUSD to suddenly depeg for on its own and then cause an issue. But even if that did happen, you would just have the community come together and use operational emirs to just pause that particular anchor as well until it's recovered. So I think it's fine to have 1 or 2 assets in general, but not for like a long term. It's healthier for the protocol to have more anchors. Oh, and the other question, the second question too. The second question about when do we get Luna UST back on THORChain? I mean, I don't. There's not much talk about that, and I don't. Doesn't seem to be there. Might be much demand or interest to add it back. To be honest with you, so I'm open to any chain more or less, but there has to be a demand for it. I certainly wouldn't put that in front of like Solana or something like this, but I don't know. I'm open to pretty much any chain as long as it's going to contribute value to the protocol.
Cool. Let's keep it moving because I got to hop here pretty soon. But if I would just say one thing before we continue on any further, there's obviously probably a lot of you joining here today because you've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter, etc. Just want to catch everyone up who's just joining, basically on the current state of things right now in the THORChain community. Is basically to say that the devs agree that all of the proposals to THORFi and Savers and POL and THORChain economics in general are still all in early draft. So there's going to be plenty of other discussion that happens before those are taken to a vote. For the node operators, savings and lending are here to stay for the time being, and we acknowledge that there's a community sentiment towards gradually scaling those features and managing the risk of THORFi. And our top priorities in terms of like new things are just anything that really can result in more stability or a better swapping experience. So we just recently spoke about Swapper Clout. We have memoless transactions coming down the pipe and order books as well. So those things are obviously taking precedent right now because those are the things that benefit the core functionality of the project, which is, of course, cross-chain swaps. But as always, performance and stability remain as the top priority. So just felt the need to, clarify that since there's been a lot of question as to, what the future of THORChain is. And the answer is always it will continue to evolve as devs and the community engage in passionate and heated debate. But in the immediate thing, we remain laser focused on all of the things I just mentioned.
Let me ask you a question, Pluto, because I'm curious to hear your perspective. What's your feelings on the idea of perpetuals? Not that I'm saying we're going to do this or whatever, but I'm just curious to your high level viewpoint on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to deny like what it does for the economics of the project, and we're all seeing the headlines right now about DYDX, surpassing volume of Uniswap, but I think those comparisons are kind of silly because perpetuals don't create spot volume, which is what everyone else is measuring, and what creates the most fees. They're capturing leveraged volume, so it's kind of like apples to oranges. I don't think that perps, like, as in the same way, I don't think that any of the THORFi features are needed for the success of THORChain. I don't think perps would be crucial, but I do think if they're designed in smart ways, I think all of these things like Tor and perps can have, really outsized impacts for the protocol. So I know I like them. I know that, I mean, I trade them. I'm a degen as well. Like, I think it's fun to, short or long things in size sometimes, even when I don't actually have my size is not size, but it makes the perps make me feel like I have size. So I think they're just fun. I think they create a lot of engagement and they obviously generate a lot of fees. And that's, anything that we can build that can generate more fees for the protocol is obviously a plus. we just have to make sure we just have to figure out how to do them, in a smart way. Like DYDX works because their like their matching and liquidation engine happens off chain, and I haven't seen any way that they're going to be able to basically. It's because it's very complex. Like perps, I think is computationally just very intensive. Like you have to look at a lot of different things. So I would love to just kind of see how the DYDX story unfolds, and see if it's even possible to do those efficiently on THORChain and not have the possibility for liquidations happening out of band, because things happen faster in crypto markets than in the actual the THORChain block time itself. So like I think it still remains to be clear as to whether there's anyone that can even do like cross-chain perps without like a separate oracle, like a separate off-chain oracle engine.
Yeah, I think perps would create more fees on the protocol, which is obviously a positive thing. More trade volume, which is obviously a positive thing. Most likely, and we don't even have a design for perps yet. We have some ideas we've kind of thrown out, but we don't really have an actual fully articulated concept quite yet. But there's been talk about how the base asset of perpetuals to be basically Tor, right? So you're always going against a stable coin in one direction or the other. And by doing that, you're creating a demand center for Tor, right? And by doing that, you're creating a demand center for buying and burning Rune, which is similar to what lending does. So it's an interesting concept, and I don't really know how I feel about it. I mean, I feel very mixed about it myself in some ways, and I wouldn't really have a strong opinion to do it or to not to do it until I've seen a proposal, a detailed proposal of how that would be done or implemented before I can actually make any final decisions or viewpoints on that. But of course, I'm not even going to be thinking about that personally for maybe not until second half of 2024. So it's not even on my radar at the current moment. But it's an interesting concept, and I was curious to get your viewpoint on it.
Yeah, totally. I think it's one of those things that like, if we can get months of uptime and 100% availability of all the connected chains of THORChain, and we can add more chains, and we can ship all the other features that we've talked about. I think that would then be a good time to start those discussions up again. But I think at the moment, discussing it just feels like there's better things to spend our time on.
What do you think, Can? I'm so curious.
This is an area I have absolutely no idea about. Like I'm not a user of perps. I know very little about them, so no comment.
All right. Anything else to talk about?
I think we could be good for today. So I mean, it's good having everyone on, and yeah, it's important to keep the flow of information going in the right direction. So I like coming on, doing these spaces, and talking with the community, because then we can kind of like, I don't know. I feel like everyone gets kind of out of whack when everyone just like talks in Discord, and it seems chaotic because everyone's kind of talking out of band. But when we have these like organized things, then we kind of puts things into a structure a little bit, and we can realign around what's important, which is like the near term priorities of stabilization and the things that we want to do in the near term, like order books, swapper cloud, trade accounts, that kind of stuff. So that's going to take up a couple months of time, and then before we know it, we'll be thinking about this stuff, and we'll have some better ideas and a better picture of where we want to take things, and to keep making this protocol safe and keep scaling up volume. Things have been going crazy for the last couple of months, so I mean, no big complaints over here. Seeing how many $1 million swaps come through on a daily and weekly basis, with that would have been the biggest swap in our history just about 6 months ago, and now it's like a daily thing. So I think it's going to get even better with with rapid swaps and limit orders and things. But yeah, man,
I'll
good
just
to kind of
also
align with you guys. Yep.
also just take a moment to just plug, like, I think what could be the most bullish signal in the entire time that I've been with this project, which is that one affiliate in particular is about to cross $1 million in affiliate fees generated in less than a month. And that is just, I think, a crazy thing that, we always knew affiliate volume was going to, be a major driver of new integrations to the platform. But ever since that got turned on, the amount of interest we've seen in integrating THORChain has been, very, very positive. So I just think that as more integrations come online and as real dollars start to flow to these businesses, and they continue to provide the useful utility of cross-chain swaps, that we're going to see a ton of more positive metrics heading in the right direction. So it seems like this is kind of just the beginning. And when that particular affiliate, it was really this time last year that they turned on swaps, and it's really been almost a year in the making getting their affiliates turned on. But now that they are, and the money is flowing, like, a lot of people are starting to notice. So it's a really, really awesome thing to see.
Yeah, no, that's actually a fantastic marker, and it's going to motivate other integration partners to get going and get integrated, because it's very profitable.
Yeah, if we're not doing 10x the daily volume that we're doing today by this time next year, I will go on live stream and eat an entire shoe.
See, I was hoping you were going to go the John McAfee route and say you're going to eat your own dick, but I'll settle for a shoe, I guess.
As long as it's seasoned with your tears, Chad. Nice and salty.
I think you got enough salt in there already, to be honest. Think about it.
Oh, yeah. Nice. All right. Well, this has been really fun, guys. I'm glad we all jumped on, and, as high as the tensions can run sometimes, you guys can obviously tell that we're generally aligned on everything, and we are just a very passionate group of people who love discussing DeFi and all things THORChain. So thanks to everyone who joined today and, got to hear a little bit more about, what the plans are and the state of play of things.
Yes, sir. It's our biggest space in a while. I think I saw like 250 people on here at one point, which is like pretty crazy. So let's keep doing it.
Yep.
By the way, a couple of us are going to be at ETH Denver. I know I'll be there. Chad will be there. I'm sure some other Thor Chads will be there. So we should definitely, be looking forward to some kind of meetup or just something at ETH Denver, because I'm sure a lot of people from the community will be there. So if you're in town, then just look out for some tweets about where people are going to be, because we'll definitely, have to make some kind of appearance there.
Yeah, 100%. I'll be there.
Let's do it. All right. Sounds good. I'll post this on RSS and, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can sign up to, subscribe to THORChain Weekly Live is the name of it. So if you search that, wherever you get your podcast, you should see it. And sounds good. Well, see you guys whenever we do the next space. Peace.
Later, guys.